Hey guys, I'm going to show you in this video how to use the background smoothing actions. So when you purchase these actions, you will see that there are two options available to install, the 8-bit version and the 16-bit. If you are unsure and you don't actually understand or know which one, you can just go with the 8-bit version. If you do edit in 16-bit, then you have that option available to you as well. I'm going to start with an easier image and also show you the first set, which is the auto. This one will select the subject. It will basically do everything for you. You'll just need to maybe brush back some shadows or just refine the edges with your brush. This image is quite straightforward because the subject isn't standing or sitting on the backdrop or you can't see their feet. It will be quite easy just to run the action, and it should do 95% of the work for you, so it should do a great job. I'm going to just go with the background smoothing medium. The wrinkles aren't that bad, so let's see how this one works. You'll see that you will always get a pop-up box with instructions, and this action does take a while to run because there's quite a lot of things happening in the background. Okay, there you go. So this action is created in such a way to prevent banding. Maybe in some odd cases you'll still get some banding, but I think most of the time you won't have a problem at all. Okay, so what you can do next is you can just zoom in, and you can, if you feel like the edges need some refining, so you can just go around the edges with your brush to refine it. Especially where you see the edges should be a little bit softer, for instance where it's out of focus, it might leave like a sharper or harder edge, and you can just refine that by using a soft brush. And well, this one is quite straightforward, it was quick and easy. Although the action does take a while to run, I think it's still much quicker and easier to do it this way. Okay, so on the next image I want to show you, this is quite extreme, the background, and I want to show you the second action. The reason we use the second action for this one is because you can adjust your selection before the action stops running, and the reason for that is because she's sitting on a suitcase. There's a very good chance that Photoshop's not going to select the suitcase, and you do want it to be part of the selection, otherwise it's going to get smoothed out with the rest of the background. So let's just go, I'm going to use the heavy because the background is very wrinkled, and you're going to get your instructions, click continue, and then the action stops. Now you can make adjustments to the selection, you can add or subtract. I'm going to click stop, and what I usually do is I use my quick selection tool that usually does a great job, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can adjust your brush size by clicking on the square brackets either to the left or the right, will make it bigger or smaller, and then I'm just going to go over the area where I want it to add to the current selection. If this happens, you can just press and hold Alt on your keyboard. You'll see it makes a minus sign in the middle of the brush, and then you can just take away from the selection again until you're happy with what it looks like. You can also adjust your brush size if you're struggling to get the selection right, just to refine it a little bit. Okay, there you go. When you're finished and you're happy with your selection, you can click on the action once again. If you're in button mode, it will look like this. If you're not in button mode, you'll just need to go to the bottom and press play again. And then the action will finish and smooth the background. There you go. Okay, so this image does need a little bit of extra work. Once again, select your brush, make sure it's on black, and then very carefully you'll need to go around the edges. There's a good chance that you might need to do this a few times, switching between the black and the white brush, just to make sure that it all looks okay. Obviously where we erase the top layer, you'll see some of the wrinkles come through again. So in this case, what I need to do is I'm just going to switch over to my white brush again. You can either do that by clicking over here, or you can press X on your keyboard. Okay, so now I'm on my white brush, and I'm just going to brush back this top smooth out layer to make sure the edges look okay. Where the edges are soft or out of focus, make sure you use a soft brush. If the edges are in focus and you have sharp or hard edges, you can use a harder brush. This will just make it look more realistic. And then over here you'll do the same thing. You can just refine everywhere. Just make sure it looks nice and neat. So just make sure you take your time, go around all the edges and check that everything looks okay. For this one, I'm also going to show you the second one where you need to make your own adjustments to the selection. Because we have the white chair over here, Photoshop won't select the chair, and as soon as you start brushing away, you'll see a white halo, which we obviously don't want. So for this one, I'm just going to use the background smoothing medium. Okay, now it asks me to make the selection. I'm going to zoom in. You can use any other selection tool as well, but once again, the quick selection tool works great in most cases. Just going to make the brush a little bit smaller. Make sure these are selected as well. And that's okay. And I'm going to continue the action. Now I just need to zoom out. Now you'll see where her feet and everything touches the ground. It looks like she's floating. What you'll need to do is just brush back some of the shadows. And once again, you're going to do that by using a black brush. At first you can set it on 100 and maybe just brush close to the subject where all the hard shadows will be. And then you can switch over to a softer brush, or at least a brush with a lower opacity. So let's put it on 20%. I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger, and you can just blend the background, the smoothed out background with the existing background. Whenever you make a mistake or you feel like you've brushed away too much, switch over to your white brush again and just brush over where you want to brush back some of the smoothed background. And then once again, you can zoom in and you can refine your edges. Switch over to black brush, I'm going to put it on 100% once again, and you can just make sure that your edges looks okay. With this image, I'm going to show you how to use the manual one. This is the action that requires more work from your side, but this is ideal for people who doesn't have the latest version of Photoshop and can't or won't be able to use the auto option. Before I start smoothing the background, I do want to get rid of this patches over here that's discolored, because it's going to show up in your background. If it doesn't bother you, that's fine, you can leave it just like that. So I'm actually going to create an empty layer. I'm going to use my brush tool and I'm going to put the opacity on, let's say 50, and I'm just going to get rid of those darker areas and where the discoloration is. Okay. And I just want to get rid of this as well, and then this part over there. Okay, that's okay. Then I'm going to, let me just flatten my image. You can say layer and flatten image. And then I'm going to run the manual option, and I'm going to choose the, let's say this background smoothing medium. Okay, it's going to stop and it's going to ask you to use your lasso tool, and the feathering is on, I'm going to put my feathering on 20, and then you can just make a rough selection around your subject, not too rough, as close as possible, but it doesn't need to be perfect. This should be perfectly fine. And then I'm going to click on my action once again so it can continue and finish the action. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to use my brush. I can put it on 100%. It needs to be on white. And I'm going to brush over the background where I want it to be smoothed out. This is also actually a very nice option to use even if you have the latest version of Photoshop. And if you prefer to use this one, that's perfectly fine. Okay, I'm just going to switch over to my black brush. I'm going to put it on a lower opacity because I just want to blend it in a little bit better over there. Just make sure you don't get a halo whenever you brush away or brush back some of the smoothing. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's move over to the next image. In this image, I'm going to also just do some background work before I use the smoothing action. You can use the action just like this, but there's going to be some discoloration on the edges where we have all of this sticking out, especially if you have brighter colors like this white and this yellow colored balloon. I just want to get rid of that. First, I'm going to just extend this part of the background, and for that I'm going to use my marquee tool to make a selection. Like always in Photoshop, there's 100 ways to do something. This is just one of the ways to do it. I'm going to make a selection, and then I'm going to use my free transform tool. You can either get that by going to edit and go to free transform, or you can just press Ctrl or Command T on your keyboard. And then you need to press and hold Shift on your keyboard when you want to drag this over. If you don't hold Shift, it will resize the whole box like that. Okay, so I'm going to press and hold Shift. I'm just going to drag it over like that. Then I'm going to hit Enter on my keyboard. And to deselect, I'm just going to press Command or Control D. Okay, there you go. This is okay because we're going to run the smoothing action, which will sort out any creases in the background. And then next, on the left, I'm just very quickly going to use my brush to brush over the area over there. Okay, I'm going to use my brush tool. I'm just going to put it on 100%, and I'm going to pick a color from the background, and you do that by clicking and holding Alt on your keyboard and then clicking with your mouse on the area where you want to make the selection. And I'm just going to do this very roughly and just quickly paint over these parts of the background. Just be careful around the fabric, you don't go over the fabric there. Okay, that's fine. And then I'm going to flatten my layers. I'm just selecting both and pressing Command or Control E on my keyboard to flatten. And then I'm going to do the auto. Let's just go with the heavy. And we're going to run this action. Now we're going to brush back some of the shadows, and we're also going to get rid of that part over there because Photoshop obviously thought that was part of the subject. And I'm just gonna then also gonna lower the opacity and just bring back some of the shadows over there. And I'm also going to zoom in. Just put my brush on black and 100% opacity again. And I'm just going to refine the edges a little bit over here. Okay, that's fine. And then over here I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to put my brush on white because I want to brush back. I'm just going to put my brush on white because I want to get rid of this person standing over here. And you can of course also use the second action where you adjust your selection. Then you don't actually have to do this with your brush, but either way there's just a little bit of work that you need to do. I'm just going to make the brush a little bit harder, and like I always say, Photoshop Actions doesn't solve all your problems. It's not going to do everything perfectly every time, but at least it should make some of your work a bit easier and help you to edit a little bit faster.